Not Saren says hello precious Gaga.
Let's see those team stickers flow.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play. Saren not Saren says Gaga and Grumps, I'm good, I hope you are well. Been waiting for your ride today.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says that's what I like to hear.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Saren not Saren says highlight of my days.
Welcome gremlins to the gang grotto.
Gaga Grumps says, and of course the leaderboard isn't leaving every day, I have to reset lol.
Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your heartbeat. Share us round. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Gang gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap
Gaga
it.
Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says so, who is ready to Wordle.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Freddie says, bro, that's not fair. I was first till the end of the song.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says creative in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says we haven't started Freddie. That was the welcome song.
Saren not Saren says at, we haven't even started yet, calm down.
Freddie says oh ha 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 ha.
Gaga Grumps says today's Wordle solve is in the filter. So be aware if we need it for today's games at all, it won't be posted lol.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says IDFWU in the house.
Gaga Grumps says oh, and
We
thanks
would
for
be
doing your
honored
daily heart, Saren.
if you would
Too
join
much to
us.
do when starting up lol. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Freddy. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C.
We would be honored.
Grumps says
if you would
welcome,
join
one
us.
and all.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Saren Not Saren says it Grumps okay, now you show up.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says it's Saren Not Saren celebs always appear fashionably late.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your
We would be
fingers
honored
dance.
if you would join us.
ECFC Chaz says yo.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please, Saren.
ECFC Ches says crest.
Saren Not Saren says crate.
Gaga Grumps says ECFC in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Saren Not Saren says at flex off you go say ya.
Grumps says it flex off you pop then.
We
Gaga
would be
Grumps
honored
says crate you got.
if you would join us. We would be honored if you would join us.
Oscar says blade.
Gaga Grumps says green A and E moved into 3 and 5 Wordle Street.
Saren Not Saren says shape.
A creative one says place.
Gaga Grumps says D in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Saren
Then
not
Jammin'
Saren
is in
says
the
if this
house.
is shape I'ma cry.
Gaga Grumps says Ash in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says Oscar in the house.
Grumps says it's Saren not Saren, why's that?
Gaga Grumps says Blade fits.
Saren not Saren says it Grumps. That's my starter word for my NYT Wordle.
Well, Creative One says shade.
Gaga Grumps says nice, very nice.
Saren not Saren says Blaze.
Grumps says it's Saren not Saren.
Oh, Creative One says Blaze.
Grumps says at dartslover _190R.
Gaga Grumps says three-way choice.
Oscar says Blaze for fireworks.
Gaga Grumps says Blaze is in the grid.
Grumps says it HANDBAGS4WHINERSG bus. Did your caps lock break?
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says we're starting with fireworks for Ryan's son.
Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks
Gaga
for
Grumps says
Gaga.
Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says it HANDBAGS4WHINERS, not even prematurely.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Saren not Saren says, my 6-year-old has been singing fireworks for Gaga.
He says ran home from work to watch your live.
Grumps says at Anna Hart hands always a god choice.
Gaga Grumps says D-Arts lover in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says ha brilliant love it. My grand cubs sing him too. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
PH7 says hello.
Gaga Grumps says PH7 in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
He says Renette.
Grumps says that Seren not Seren really need to release the songs properly, then you can stream M 24/7. Grumps says at PH7 Heya.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
PH7 says, the letter Y.
Seren not Seren says at Grumps no I hear them in my sleep as it is.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS like anyone could miss that. Grumps says at Seren not Seren. Grumps says at Josie Moo Haya.
Gaga Grumps says you got fireworks Ryan, what more you want? Lol.
He says carts.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C again.
Grumps says at CL Heya.
Gaga Grumps says Ryan oin the nose. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Gaga Grumps says send your heart me for TTS.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and sniper list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
PH7 says at no spamming.
He says him liking but him not on the leaderboard.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please Ryan.
Grumps says spamming is pointless, at best it gets you a timeout.
Seren not Seren says has Ryan got 2 accounts, or is there 2 Ryans?
Gaga Grumps says yeah it happens to everyone best we've got. Gaga Grumps says he changed his name again Seren.
He says at Gaga, and Grumps I did over 100 and still didn't beat the person on 60.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out.
He says an idea who and what's happening.
PH7 says Savoy.
E says wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says I did it again, didn't I, Ryan? PH7 says Savoy.
Saren, not Saren, says ha ha ha. Ryan said chump.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS the glass eye is rubbish.
Gaga Grumps says I effing confirmed chump and still typed in chiunk. Gaga Grumps says bread fits.
Saren not Saren says it Gaga, and Grumps let Ryan pick starter word for next game.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS it's outrageous, is it not?
Gaga Grumps says a green A moved into 5 Wordle Street and R needs a home.
PH7 says 4A.
Gaga Grumps says I did exactly the same to him yesterday, Saren lol.
Handbags for Weiner says at Grumps am blind in my right eye and halved in my left.
PH7 says Muller.
Gaga Grumps says SolarWorks.
PH7 says Coral.
Gaga Grumps says oh we have 4 out of 5.
PH7 says moral it is.
Grumps says at Ella send a daily heart.
PH7 says or royal.
Gaga Grumps says moral is in the grid. Gaga Grumps says moral in 4.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let the
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart thing.
Grumps says at Ella in gifts, the heart me for 1 coin.
Gaga Grumps says do the Gaga. Share the live chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Exam Bacon says, good afternoon everyone, how's Wordle with Gaga going?
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next word. Gaga Grumps says eggs in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says chaotic, thanks to me eggs lol. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says Ryan has the starting word for this one.
Exam Bacon says any fireworks or wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. PH7 says let's go Ryan. Gaga Grumps says one of each eggs.
Grumps says at Ella if you're under 18, it's likely not available to you. TikTok is rather strict there.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. I.
Grumps says that AI audio is not going to happen, ever.
Gaga Grumps says like race cancel for this game. Your word starting with I please Ryan.
Grumps says at CH4 Lee 154 why should she?
Handbags for WHINERS says itchy.
Gaga Grumps says cause I cocked up Ryan's starting word for the second time lol. Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking, there is a pinned post on my page explaining.
Grumps says at ARI because it's a terrible word to start with.
Gaga Grumps says itchy you got.
Grumps says at ARI precisely.
PH7 says that ARI bad starter. Gaga Grumps says I like quiz shows on TV, but my favorite of all time is Buffy and Star Trek. Gaga Grumps says a yellow eye in need of a home.
Eggs and Bacon says prime.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says eerie.
Grumps says bummer, I had the wipeouts preloaded.
PH7 says mixer.
Eggs and Bacon says prime.
Gaga Grumps says prime fits.
Handbags for whiners says at Grumps Ha.
Gaga Grumps says no change 8 letters wiped from the game. Gaga Grumps says snail works.
IDFWU says ninja.
Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless N and A.
PH7 says ninja.
Handbags for whiners says ninja.
LL Creative One says ninja.
PH7 says divan, ninja, niqab, kinda.
Eggs and Bacon says ninja is a shout.
Gaga Grumps says ninja is a shout.
PH7 says divan.
IDFWU says divan.
Or Creative One says need filler.
Gaga Grumps says danger zone let's filter.
PH7 says it's the only word.
Handbags for whiners says kinda good filler.
Eggs and Bacon says no filter needed.
PH7 says N isn't third.
Gaga Grumps says indeed ninja killed the other options.
Grumps says at Mason G. Yo.
Gaga Grumps says divan in 5. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Eggs and Bacon says Wordle with Gaga.
Chosen by fate, play a part, it's a live date.
Handbags for whiners says GGW, 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 white winning speedos.
Gaga Grumps says, do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results. Gaga Grumps says, if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next word.
Grump says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS, what happened to the pink?
Gaga Grumps says, let's play Wordle.
Handbags for whiners says at Grumps WS in the chat law.
Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. E. Gaga Grumps says I've forgotten already. Think it was 5 today. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
LL Creative 1 says we're up to a good start.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grump says at Lucy 9.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with E, please, Ryan.
Grump says Ebola.
Handbags for whiners says Ebola.
Gaga Grumps says you and your bloody virus. Gaga Grumps says Ebola isn't valid. Or at least it wasn't on the original. Let's test it here. Gaga Grumps says not valid here either.
Handbags for whiners, says lol.
Grumps says boo, hiss.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says Ebony.
Gaga Grumps says Ebony you got.
Scaffold Stick says good day, Gaga and Grumps.
Handbags for whiners says at Grumps we wiped out.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow O in need of a home.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS it's such a lovely word, too.
Scaffold Stiff says opium.
Handbags for whiners says QOSPH.
Gaga Grumps says Steve in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS Gesundheit.
Gaga Grumps says opium fits. Gaga Grumps says no change 8 letters wiped from the game.
Scaffold Steve says Valor.
Gaga Grumps says can't be ghost or wolves. Gaga Grumps says Valor works.
Handbags for whiners says Cargo. A creative one says at Handbags for whiners can the daily heart fit with your username? Lol.
Scaffold Stiff says at IDF, well, I think that's it.
Gaga Grumps says might have scrolled off before I saw it IDFWU. I don't go scrolling back to find the first guess. Gaga Grumps says cargo is in the grid.
Welcome, Gremlins.
Gaga Grumps says cargo in 4.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your heartbeat.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins.
Now tap that
Let's
screen,
see those
tap it,
W's
tap it,
in the
tap
chat.
that screen, yeah, tap it, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto.
Now tap that
Take a
screen.
seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and connect.
Game Gremlins, come and let's go. gremlins on the scene. Whoa, whoa. Now tap that screen. Whoa.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says welcome back, Hannah.
Now tap that screen. Whoa, whoa. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Mandy's TikTok shop says juice.
Mandy's TikTok shop says queen.
Gaga Grumps says grumps on the nose.
Welcome Noah to Wordle with Gaga.
Mandy's TikTok shop says quilt.
Grumps says vindication.
Scaffold Steve says at grumps. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Mandy's TikTok shop says queen.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Mandy's TikTok shop says queen.
Gaga Grumps says woo creative out of like jail for traditional one game. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Q please creative.
Mandy's TikTok shop says quilt.
Mandy's TikTok shop says quiet.
Handbags for whiners says my caps weren't counting. I thought I was in jail, lol.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says then boom there I was Acon place.
Well, creative one says quick.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the shields daily and the sleigh Mandy. Gaga Grumps says quick you got.
Scaffoldstive says at Handbags for Whiners I send over 500 and I'm not even on the board.
Grumps says Quake.
Gaga Grumps says wheel on the nose. Scaffold Steve says Quake.
Handbags for WHINERS says Quake.
Oscar says at IDF we're very good wipeout, eh?
Claire Liss says Q.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 2.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga.
Handbags for Whiners says fireworks.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says at Dorinto Par 1409
Fireworks for
problem.
Gaga.
Handbags for Whiners says fireworks.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Kath G says Knox.
Gaga Grumps says Grumps is on the buttons Anna.
Well, creative one says Grumps you got UQ word win.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says at ill creative one I can retire in peace at last.
Gaga Grumps says Claire in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Kath G says please double tap your screen and repost the live and put your heart me hashtag FYP.
Gaga Grumps says Kath in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says where have my sounds gone?
Or creative one says at Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Oh, creative one says hashtag FYP.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says if you appreciate my live of course coffee lol.
Grump says at Larry Shepherd 02 higher.
Scaffold Steve says at CL nothing is real. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. S.
Grump says at CL what?
Kath G says snips.
Amelia says fine.
Gaga Grumps says there is no spoon.
Kath G says snipe.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Scaffold Stiff says at Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says you'd get TTS with the Galaxy Cos Top Gifters, get it lol.
Like a thon, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned, like a thon, gremlin renowned, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Mandy's TikTok shop says slump.
Mandy's TikTok shop says snake. Kath G says snaps.
Handbags for Whiners says I knew it was going to happen.
Gaga Grumps says Ryan won the race and then swoops the Grumps and steals the crown right off his head.
The creative one says sniped.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S please Grumps.
Scaffold Stiff says at handbags for whiners.
Grump says snipe.
Gaga Grumps says snipe you got.
Kath G says sting.
Mandy's TikTok shop says swamp.
Gaga Grumps says I am smiling Jake. It's just a bit one-sided lol.
Scaffold Stiff says quick. IDFW says trial.
Gaga Grumps says agreeing I moved into number 3 Wordle Street.
Mandy's TikTok shop says quilt.
DVP says chick.
Gaga Grumps says I know Jake. I was trying to be funny and failed. Kathji says trims.
Mandy's TikTok shop says quilt.
Gaga Grumps says trial fits.
Grumps says TikTok filtering like mad. Behave yourselves.
IDFW says send.
IDFW says daily.
Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless A and L. Scaffold Steve says daily.
LL Creative 1 says faily.
Handbags for WHINERS says daily.
Gaga Grumps says daily works.
Kathji says stale.
Well, Creative One says daily.
Gaga Grumps says we end daily.
IDFW says gaily.
Well, Creative One says Haley.
Handbags for Whiners says at LL Creative 1, I thought you had me that time. Then Grumps swoops in.
Well, Creative One says Whaley.
Gaga Grumps says I don't recognize any of these words lol.
Grumps says Whaley Goggle Man.
Kath G says Bailey.
Gaga Grumps says I think we should filter.
Scaffold Steve says at Butter Chicken there's no S-chill.
Handbags for WHINERS says to blame for filter.
Gaga Grumps says cause I don't know which of them is a real word lol.
Well, Creative One says gaily.
Kathji says try putting a full before your answer.
Gaga Grumps says well the help not. Kath G says sorry meant. Full stop. Gaga Grumps says I have to go check that one.
Well, Creative One says there's Haley.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says it took out the M and B lol.
Kathji says really.
Well, Creative One says Bailey and Naily.
Gaga Grumps says okay, I thought it was spelled gaily but obviously not.
The Creative One says I dictionary.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says doo-doo for Gaga. Share the live chat and shower her with roses and GGs. Kathleen says well done. Gaga Grumps says I have no recognition of it with an eye at all.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says Amelia, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says sorry, had to reboot Tickfinity.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says for the third time today we are starting with A. C.
Grumps says at Gale.ok.
Scaffold Stiff says at Gale.ok.
Gaga Grumps says Gale on the nose. Gaga grumps, says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Kath G says Coke.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned.
Gaga grumps, says want to steal the starting words. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga grumps, says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga grumps, says your word starting with C, please rhyme.
Jimmy says it's Jimmy.
Kath G says chime.
Well, Creative One says choose chair Ryan.
Handbags for whiners says chop.
Gaga grumps, says Jimmy in the house.
Grumps says it Jimmy oi oi.
Jimmy says at Gaga and Grumps, how are you doing?
Kath G says crack.
Jimmy says at Grumps or Grandpa.
Grumps says it HANDBAGS4WHINERS chump you mean.
Gaga grumps, says doing better today, Jimmy.
Handbags for whiners says at Grumps Law.
Gaga grumps, says a yellow M in need of a home.
Kath G says crump. Scaffold Stiff says movie.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says major.
Jimmy says at Gaga, and Grumps that's good to hear.
Well, Creative One says Menti.
DVP says smile.
Gaga grumps, says melon fits. Gaga grumps, says we added a homeless E.
Scaffold Stiff says Emery.
Kath G says meals.
The Creative One says fairy.
Gaga grumps, says Emery works and tests the E for 2 places.
Thanks for the follow!
Gaga grumps, says it's an air trap.
The creative one says Amber.
Gaga Grumps says Gamer is in the grid.
Kath G says lamer.
Scaffold Steve says tamer.
Handbags for whiners says tamer.
Gaga Grumps says must be tamer.
Jimmy says tamer.
The creative one says yes.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Kath G says well done, Jamie.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says, do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results. Gaga Grumps says Jinx in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next rig. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
JNX says brick.
Gaga
Kath
Grumps
G
says what
says
letter will
X.
the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
It's Cooper! It's Cooper! Wiggle butt, just a little mud.
Gaga Grumps says but first we wiggle.
Gremlin say what? He's a corgi, don't you know? His name is Cooper, watch him go. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with a wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With a wiggle butt, just a little mud with a wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With a wiggle butt. That cute and fluffy puffball tail, Cooper, we do, yeah. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with a wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With a wiggle butt.
Jenny says I always use the coins from the treasure boxes in here to just give back the coins I receive.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the wiggles D. Gaga Grumps says okay wheel.
Jinx says coral.
Gaga Grumps says the wheel have a favorite letter today. We are starting with A. C.
Scaffold Stiff says C again.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming.
Kath
Tap
G
those
says
screens.
could.
The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like a thon, fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my page explaining. Gaga Grumps says wow, that was a fight at the end, but creative jumped the list in a split second. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please creative.
Jimmy says Gaga pin that message so when people join they can see it.
Kath G says sharing, caring, tapping free.
Kath G says could.
O Creative One says canny.
Gaga Grumps says pins only last a minute. The welcome message does say I'm non-speaking.
Kath G says chippy.
Gaga Grumps says canny you got.
Jimmy says oh yeah I forgot since I know you're non-speaking.
Handbags for Whiners says chunk.
Grump says at Jimmy it literally tells you on entering. People just don't read.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow A in need of a home.
Handbags for whiners, says Apple. Jinx says Ariel.
Or Creative One says alter.
Kath G says play.
Jinx says Ariel.
Jimmy says at Grumps, that's 100% true, BC. I already know Gaga is non-speaking. And that is 100% fine with me. I like.
Scaffold Steve says Amber.
Jimmy says Gaga the way she is.
Kath G says plain.
Grumps says it Jimmy same as it tells you not to spoil the daily Wordle, or get muted, and I still end up muting.
Gaga Grumps says not sure Ariel isn't just a name. Let's spin it to find out. Jimmy says at Grumps yes. Gaga Grumps says it's valid.
Jimmy says frail.
Gaga Grumps says strange is 6. Scaffold Steve says graph. Kath G says fraily.
L says hello.
Gaga Grumps says graph works.
Grumps says at tilde lula tilde. Laters.
Jimmy says draft.
Grumps says at L higher.
The creative one says brawl.
JS says draft.
Handbags for whiners says draft.
Jimmy says at Cassandra she is non-speaking. There is a pinned video.
JS says draft.
Gaga Grumps says drama is in the grid.
Jimmy says I meant to say can't not can.
Kath G says drame.
L says how is everyone?
JS says draft.
JS says I think the only option is draft now.
Gaga Grumps says is draft the only option.
Jimmy says draft.
A creative one says draft.
JS says is draft a word.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says draft in 5.
Jimmy says I did say draft before.
JS says nice.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, it's your warm-up routine.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Kath G says well done.
Kath D says by everyone.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, Game Gremlins, come and let's go. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says by tap thanks for
Yeah,
coming.
tap it, let's see those team stickers flow. Game Gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
says at Kath G laters.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Or Creative One says at Grumps, do you know Grumpy Gula?
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says he is a grumpy gorilla. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Jimmy says at Gaga and Grumps wins he never grumpy ha ha ha.
JS says ill I think.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, D.
JS says you can do draft again.
Creative One says move to the next letter of the alphabet.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
We would be honored.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers.
We would be honored if you would join us. We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with D please Grumps. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Eanes, JS and Jimmy.
Grumps says what the frack happened there. Every tap counted for once.
Handbags for Whiners says taps aren't working.
Eanes Dine Sweat says testing.
Grumps says dread.
JS says dread it is.
Gaga Grumps says you should do Eanes.
Eanes Dine Sweat says I got a cool voice.
Gaga grumps, says Dread you got.
The creative one says at handbags for whiners Grumps needed that when Ryan.
Ian's Dean Sweat says, oh, it's random.
Gaga grumps, says Yellow Ian are in need of homes. Scaffold Steve says alive.
JS says stale.
Ian's Dine Sweat says peach.
Gaga grumps, says the voice is random each time. Only grumps and I have assigned voices.
A creative one says alter.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Jimmy says clean.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
JS says stale.
A creative one says leany.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says no R.
Gaga grumps, says stale fits.
Well, creative one says skate.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga grumps, says we added a homeless S. Gaga grumps, says L in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. JS says ashen.
Handbags for whiners says I'll. Handbags for whiners says NVM.
Gaga grumps, says ashen works. Gaga grumps, says who said ask you.
Grumps says at Jurassic.Leonardo higher.
JS says maybe something like a skew.
Handbags for whiners says at CAIVIR.ANON.
Saren not Saren says askew.
Gaga grumps, says sorry I lost you fireworks IDFWU.
Handbags for whiners says askew.
Good game.
Gaga grumps, says ask you in full.
Handbags for whiners says fireworks.
Good game. Good game. Good game.
Don't let him push
Good
yours.
game.
Are you ready
Good
to
game.
play? Let those
Good
stickers
game.
fly.
Good game. Good game.
Which team
Good game.
are you on? Team Gaga, give
Good
it
game.
cheer. Team Grumps are
Gaga
Good game.
grumps, says GG Gremlins.
Good game.
Let's see those W's in the
Good
chat.
game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga grumps, says Doobadoo the Gaga.
Good game.
Share the live chat for chat and shower her with roses and
Good
GGs.
game. Good 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 game.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Good game. Good game. Good
A
game.
creative one says at IDF, what does your username mean?
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Handbags for Whiners says IDNTF. With you?
Oh, creative one says okay.
Gaga Grumps says wheel likes the first 5 letters today.
Grump says at ill creative one I don't find words useful.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like a thon, fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with E, please, Ryan.
Grump says at BL0 SM higher.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says Ebola lol JK.
Gaga Grumps says lol. Gaga Grumps says MTE bot.
A creative one says these taps are finicky.
Gaga Grumps says yellow M in need of a home.
JAS says manner.
Handbags for whiners, says Major.
Thanks for the follow.
LL Creative One, says Maker.
Gaga Grumps, says Mana Fits. Gaga Grumps says M moved into number 1 and O needs a home.
JS says mold.
IDFWU says no why.
Gaga Grumps says no Y for moldy.
Handbags for whiners says no why.
JS says I would do mold.
Gaga Grumps says Mogul works.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance.
JS says nice.
Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
IDFWU says fireworks for Gaga.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Handbags for whiners says fireworks.
Anything will be okay.
Handbags for whiners says fireworks.
Still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says thanks IDFWU. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Creative One says Grumps, how did you get up to over 500 last round and then to 100 something? The wheel is ruthless. Handbags for whiners, says ya.
Gaga Grumps says still in the first 5 letters we are starting with A. B. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at Ill Creative One, wish I knew.
thumb. Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like
Gaga Grumps says he's tapping like a maniac. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says wow, 3 wins today, your word starting with B, please creative. Gaga Grumps says must be a record. Gaga Grumps says hi, Will.
A creative one says barge.
Gaga Grumps says barge you got. Gaga Grumps says wheel on the nose. Gaga Grumps says yellow A&E in need of homes.
Saren not Saren says beast.
The creative one says beast.
Gaga Grumps says beanie fits.
Scaffold Stiff says B-Sticks.
PH7 says beastie.
Saren not Saren says beads.
PH7 says bleak.
Saren not Saren says HMM.
Saren not Saren says bread.
Handbags for whiners says bleak.
Saren not Saren says never mind lol.
Gaga Grumps says bleak works.
A creative one says bleak.
Gaga Grumps says so near.
PH7 says bleat.
A creative one says bleat.
Saren not Saren says bleat.
Eanes Dinesweat says this is cringe. April Fools.
Gaga Grumps says darn it, bleat was my first thought.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grumps is on the buttons!
Sarah Not Saren says Gaga and Grumps, of course.
Ready to play? Let those stickers fly!
A creative one says bleep is spelled beep.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team
Gaga Grumps says I remember this morning. Forgot again until now roll.
Gremlins, let's go! Hey! Gremlins, let's go! Team Gaga, 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 Team Gaga, give a
Gaga Grumps says can you help me with my daily Wordle? Please go to my page and comment on my posts with words you'd like me to use next.
Gremlins, let's go! Hey! Gremlins, let's go! Game!
Gaga Grumps says time to fit one last game in.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
A creative one says you chose a letter at Gaga for April Fool's
if you
lol.
would join us.
Gaga Grumps says wow wheel remembered there's more letters in the alphabet.
IDFW says I have to go. It was nice being here. Love y'all.
Gaga Grumps says we're starting again. N.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says Miller in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says at Miller Gaming Heya.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for coming IDWFU.
Grumps says at IDFWU have a good one.
Gaga Grumps says level up coming at end of game. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn. Fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Hearts be flying like a thorn.
Level up.
Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says 4. That's definitely a record your word starting with N please creative.
Sarah Not Saren says that Ronnie bore off.
Gaga Grumps says we are wordling Ronnie. Why, what are you doing?
Grumps says at page smiley face, no. Grumps says at Ronnie up you shut.
A creative one says nifty. Let's see if we can get a wipeout.
Saren Not Saren says get rid Grumps can tell it's school holidays.
Gaga Grumps says nifty you got. Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Saren Not Saren says at ANNIE less than 3 don't spam.
Gaga Grumps says spamming won't get your word used.
A creative one says place.
Gaga Grumps says elope fits.
Saren Not Saren says at ANNIE less than 3 okay.
Gaga Grumps says it's a double.
Saren Not Saren says double wipeout.
The creative one says dusty.
Grumps says this shapes up to be a glorious final word.
Gaga Grumps says no why.
Grumps says it ill creative one know why.
Sarah Not Saren says at LL creative one no T or Y.
Saren Not Saren says nitrogen monoxide Gaga.
Grumps says at page no I.
Gaga Grumps says shrub works.
The creative one says triple.
Gaga Grumps says a triple. I've never seen a triple.
A creative one says 1 for the books.
Grumps says at page what? Grumps says at Geo Grey Heart Mirror Ball no ESRT.
Thanks for the follow!
PH7 says yes, mama.
Gaga Grumps says magma is a good shout. Spin.
Grumps says at page you said a word containing a letter we knew was not in it.
PH7 says gamma it is.
O Creative 1 says gamma.
Gaga Grumps says geez this board is a record breaker.
Saren Not Saren says respect Grumps in the chat. Hashtag justice for GUMPS.
Good game.
Grumps says it's Saren not Saren.
Book Creative One says what a April Fool's board.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says what an epic end. Gaga Grumps says a quick segue for this. Level up in the room for Miller.
Guessed it wrong, you guessed it right. Now here we
Grumps says at page mutes are handed out with reason.
Level up.
Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess this snap. Level unlocked, shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me thrive.
Grumps says at Brit Mango the joys of Easter week.
Book Creative One says at GUMPS you're going to pin that board.
Grumps says at Ill Creative One it should be bleeding framed.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for leveling up in the room Miller. Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Grumps says at Brit Mango thanks for T-Warning.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Will the fireworks fly? Thanks for the follow. A random star chosen by fate. Play a part. It's a live date.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.